Broadcasting to our flagship station, KNYE in Pahrump, Nevada, and worldwide on the internet, this is Midnight in the Desert. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be in this great, big, wonderful world. Thank you for making us your home for the best in anomalous talk radio. We've got a great show lined up for you a little bit later on, the Witching Hour. Ellen Everett Hopman joins us. We talk about druids and witchcraft and witches and some interesting stories on these characters that I have been unfamiliar with. But starting off this show is a topic that I've been fascinated with. As somebody who has put myself out in the field of paranormal investigating and going to locations with reported hauntings, one of my favorite ways to access a location this way is through the art of EVP, electronic voice phenomena. And I can already hear eyes rolling when I say the art of EVP. There is an art to collecting EVP because, as you can tell, most of it is subjective. Its sound quality is not the greatest. It's not a direct conversation that can be clearly and audibly heard all the time. So there is kind of an art to listening and training your ear to hear through the static, the hiss, the hum, the quiet, and see if there is something there. And also, if you're technologically savvy, looking at the audio waves that come through and boosting some of these audio waves to see if there is a voice that was underlying. Now, it is one of the most subjective and one of the most controversial forms of paranormal investigating as well, because there are many mistakes that can be made. Audio pareidolia, hearing something and your brain trying to make sense of it. Well, there's an art to understanding and knowing when something should be let go and when something might be presented as actual evidence. That's what we're going to talk about this evening. Dean Warsing, our guest, as we discuss voices from beyond. And Dean is a paranormal investigator, presently lead investigator for the, is this Octoraro Paranormal Society? Am I saying that right?
It's actually Octoraro Paranormal Society.
Okay.
Yes.
And now you teach 2 paranormal classes for Cecil College in Elkton, Maryland, talking about electronic voice phenomena. That's a pretty cool perspective. How did you talk some school into letting you come in and do that?
Well, apparently they'll let anybody in, huh? But when the first college I went to about it, I kind of said, hey, I would like to teach a course, a non-credit course on the paranormal. Can I come in and talk to you? And if I don't blow your socks off, we won't do it. And I go into her office and I said, do you know what EVPs are? And she goes, no, I've never heard of it. I said, well, let me get my phone out here. And I played a bunch of EVPs for her, and I told her how we collected them and how we believe they're from entities. And she's like, wow, let's do this. And we got a real good response. And then since then, I've went to Cecil College, a different college, and do it there also.
Talk to me about your interest in the paranormal. Is this something that has always been a part of your life since childhood, or did you kind of come in on this wave since the early 2000s of the popularity in TV programming and the rise in books and radio programs talking about the supernatural?
It is incredible, Dave, how popular it is now. For me, when I was a little kid, I was into monsters, werewolf, Dracula, and all that stuff. And in a way, you're kind of being a paranormal fan and maybe not even knowing it's paranormal per se. But I can remember, I don't know, being 8 or 9, and my Uncle Mike would come over, and he would tell stories to my mom about, like, Betty and Barney Hill. And I can remember being, like, super intrigued by the stories, but they also kind of scared me. And that kind of started the interest in it. And then I think I was 12, don't hold me to it. Me, my brother Clint, a friend named Joe, we were all ice skating at night in this pond behind our house called Weeds Pond. And we had a full moon, which was really good because you could see everything clearly, even though it was nighttime. And all of a sudden, something blotted out the light from the moon, and we all kind of stopped. And there were some other neighborhood kids there. I just can't confirm exactly who it was. So there was a whole handful of kids there. So this thing blots out the moon, and we look up, and there is this giant black rectangle. I mean, it looked like a skyscraper sitting on its side, floating right over us, blotting out the moon. And it was a shade of black, but it was a little bit different than the night sky, so we could easily see the outline. Matter of fact, it was so close to us, I could see like mechanical detail in the skin, not unlike like if you ever worked on your car and you look underneath your car, you'll see a pan like bent for a pipe or something, you know. It just wasn't shiny flat. And it just silently floated right over us. And I was like, boy, we don't know nothing. I mean, I don't even want to call it a UFO because I don't think it's unidentified. I think it's identified in that we can say it's not of Earth. I mean, it was defying gravity. It was completely silent. And I've Googled this type of sighting. You can't find anything on it. And I think I was so lucky. It was equivalent to winning the lottery. If you weren't exactly in the right place at the right time, and then on top of that, something to cue you to look up at it, you'd have never known it was there. If this thing was 100 yards to the left or right of us and it didn't blot out the moon, I don't think we would ever even spotted it.
Did you ever do any research back to see if there were reports, either in local papers or news or even through MUFON at that point?
Honestly, being a 12-year-old kid, I didn't really. I have so many regrets. Like I wish we all wrote it up because I think I was 12. You know, I'm 55 now. I really don't remember. I could have been 11 or I could have been 13. But I wish at that time I had the wherewithal to know to maybe write it up, draw some pictures of it, maybe call some newspapers, look into it, airports. We didn't do anything. We were kids. We just saw it and we went home and we told our mom about it. And that was about it.
I'm talking, though, as an adult, now that you are a quote-unquote investigator, have you ever gone back to look in that kind of time era of when, you knew you were about 12? Would there have been any kind of reports around that time era that you're aware of? It's just I've had a lot of people that do end up going back and researching, and they find something really peculiar in the news, and I didn't know if that was something that you might have tried.
I have not. But I did kind of Google the event or just any kind of craft that would be similar. I've never really heard of a black rectangle on its side. I've heard of triangles and discs and other things. But no, I didn't get anything on it. And I wish I probably should try to look into that. It just kind of seems like back then I don't know how much. I mean, there could be something. I guess there could be something.
When you reflect back on that, and I know we're going to talk about electronic voice phenomenon and ghost investigating, but do you remember any other aspects of that? Do you remember sound distorted, sense of smell, any other sensations that might have been engaged if you really kind of sink yourself into that moment again?
I do not, but there's some odd things. One, I don't understand why I wasn't scared. I should have been. For some reason, that should have been, as I look at it as an adult, it should have been very intimidating. Now, there is a part of the story I left out. I ran across a cut cornfield with my skates on, which is very difficult to do, to get to the back of my house. I wanted my mom to come out and see it. And from the back of our house, you just couldn't see it. If you weren't on top of the thing, you couldn't make it out. But no sounds. But just a validating part of the story. This is maybe when I was 12 and I'm an adult now, and my brother works for me, and every once in a great while we'll turn to each other and go, hey, you remember that thing down the pond? Oh, yeah, that was crazy. And then my friend Joe, he moved to Florida for a while, but just recently he was back up this way, and I said, Joe, do you remember we were down at the pond and we saw that thing? And he's like, oh, yeah, I'll never forget that. So it's kind of cool that all three of us as adults remember the event also.
That is right. Then there's something much more profound about that moment. Have you ever considered going back for like a regression to see if you could pick up more details or information? There is a belief out there that everybody that has seen a UFO has been abducted or has had contact with aliens.
Maybe some lost time. I actually have thought about that a lot, and it's funny to me. And of course it would be this way. I don't feel like I lost any time or anything weird like that happened, but maybe everybody that loses time kind of feels that way. I've thought about it, but in a way, there's almost a part of me that goes, you're kind of wasting your time. There's nothing lost there, but maybe that's why that works so well.
Could be. All right, So you go from having an unidentified flying object encounter and seeing this to certainly, that tickles the brain and starts really kind of an interesting journey And much like you, there'd just been weird things throughout my entire life that kept me pursuing and reading and wanting to know more or try to understand more about these type of things. But what about ghosts in general? Have you had experiences as a youth or teen with what you would now deem to be ghosts?
No, nothing as a teen. Matter of fact, I just saw my first ghost probably 2 years ago. And it wasn't even a person, it was a dog. Basically, I had this little dog, and her whole mission in life was to protect me. And if wherever I was in the house, she followed me around. If I would go upstairs, she would go upstairs. If I would go upstairs and take a shower, she would camp right outside the bathroom door. And there was this thing where I would forget she's there, and when I'd open the door, I'd do this little stutter step so that the door wouldn't hit her in the butt, because she's kind of like running around to miss the door swinging. And that would happen a lot, you know. So she died, and I don't know, months, maybe a year had went by, and honestly, I wasn't even thinking about her, but I happened to be in the bathroom. I come out, I see this black mass go around the door. I do the stutter step and stop the door again. And then I went, wow, did I just see that? So I may have seen a ghost there, but nothing much. Didn't grow up in a haunted house. Didn't really see anything peculiar as a young man. I think what made my journey continue is I discovered Art Bell, big Art Bell fan. And I used to love it when the GIS would come on there, the Ghost Investigator Society. It was Brendan Cook and Barbara McBrath. Do you remember them, Dave? Or
no, not offhand.
Okay, well they were a ghost investigating society, and they seemed to be very good at they got. And I was just always
I apologize. I don't know if you're getting a call in at the same time, but suddenly you went into stutter step mode while you were talking. So if you could repeat that, I just want to make sure the listeners heard what you were just saying.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, big fan of Art Bell, and I used to love it when the GIS would come in there. There were the Ghost Investigating Society. Matter of fact, Dave, if I could use the power of your show, if I could get in touch with Brendan Cook or Barbara McBeth, I think Barbara did Heather's show maybe a couple years ago, so maybe they still listen, but I would love to compare notes with them. That would be awesome. But anyway, they would go on there and do the EVP thing, and Art always, he kind of had a love-hate situation with EVPs. He loved hearing them, but yet they scared him. He would even comment that his wife at the time, Ramona, wouldn't listen to the radio. They thought there was something taboo about hearing the dead. And I guess early on, I got some equipment, and I started doing some EVP stuff, and got results. And that's one thing I like about EVPs. I think it's one of the most one of the easiest things to capture.
Right, one of the most accessible.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you could wait a whole lifetime to see a ghost or an object moved or something. It doesn't mean you'll see it, but if you put the time in, you can get EVPs. It might take you a little while. And the other thing I like about it, it's not people that are psychic or special. Anybody can do this. It's repeatable. I mean, I teach classes on it. My students go out and they get EVPs, and they don't have to take my word for it. They knew exactly where they were standing in that graveyard. They knew nobody was talking. They knew they didn't say it, but there's a voice on that tape. I mean, it's actually remarkable that it works.
It is. Well, that something is happening, you know,
yes.
whether, and I don't want to just dismiss and throw the baby out with the bathwater, whether it's us imprinting on the audio, our thoughts, or whether we're picking up stray voices from an other universe, alternate reality, or the dead. Something strange is going on, and it doesn't happen all the time. But when you really do get that, you know, A and B grade electronic voice and phenomena, that disembodied voices, it's kind of an adrenaline rush, right? Because it's something that you can account for everybody there and what was going on, and you got an immediate response to this.
Absolutely, and then. The other thing that's interesting is sometimes you'll get information that you personally didn't know. So it makes you wonder if it in any way could have emanated from you as a person, or is it a completely different entity? I remember the GIS and Art Bell, they got a EVP one time in a where they prepare bodies for death in an embalming place.
In the morgue?
Yeah, it was like the morgue, yes, exactly. And the EVP was, the lady was unhappy about plastic eyes. And none of them really knew what plastic eyes mean. And then they went and talked to the mortician. And I guess the eyes collapse after you die, so they put pieces of plastic in there to keep their form. And they had no idea that occurred. So they got contemporary information that neither of them knew about.
Well, I wasn't familiar with that myself. I'm sorry. I thought there was more of the story. That's why I waited for a second. That's news to me here. Even at the age of 51, I was not familiar that was part of the protocol for preparing a body for death. But I guess that's right. You would have some natural sinking. But all right. So you get these kind of bits of information that come back that, again, corroborating evidence, we call it, right? When you're getting evidential pieces that give you information of something you wouldn't have known, or that can be corroborated with the history that you might not have known. That's pretty exciting. And I remember, getting my first electronic voice phenomena when I went out in search of it, and just having my mind completely explode. And the more I got into this, the more I realized I think I was hearing things in my youth as well. I used to have an old radio as I grew up in the 70s at the height of, Convoy and the Dukes of Hazzard popularity. Everybody was doing CB radios, and I used to have this blocky radio that did AM, FM, and then you could tune in and listen to CB truck drivers talk. And if you were within about 5 feet, you could push the button and you could talk back to them. And sometimes they could hear you, sometimes they couldn't. But I used to just listen to the banter back and forth, and I was always fascinated by it. And there was a few occasions when this mechanical, creepy voice would appear to be speaking to me in my room. And
wow.
Yeah, and there was one time it was so dead on. It was like, I was playing with my G.I. Joes or something, and I threw Joe off my bed like he'd fallen off a cliff, and I heard this voice go, "That looks like it hurt." And I'm like, okay, well, that could just be coincidence. Maybe he saw a car accident. But as I did a few more things, it was responding to what I was doing, and it really unnerved me. I turned off that radio and gave it to my dad, and it stayed in the garage for 30 plus years. And I finally, as an adult, got the radio back, but you know what? It's still in my garage and I haven't messed with it, which is stupid. You think as a paranormal investigator who likes EVP, he'd break it out, but that voice was unlike any voice I'd ever heard doing EVP. It was this mechanical, when you scrub an EVP, and for people that are listening, it's when you try to take away the pop and hiss and you try to raise the volume. Sometimes you scrub it and it gets almost this mechanical metal sound to it, and it's horrible. That's what this sounded like this mechanical voice coming through the transmission. But when you think about it, and a lot of good voices that I've captured or heard sound like they're raised above the sound floor of what you're recording. So if you're using, shack hacks or radios or white noise as a template in the background, or even just background noise, it sounds like this voice is overlaid on these different, pieces of evidence. And it's like separate from the noise that you're hearing in the background. That's also been kind of an interesting fascination for me, of trying to understand how it does that. How does that voice come through? And when I remember back to that radio, it sounded like the voice came from the radio, but yet it sounded like it was in front of the radio, if that makes sense, when you were hearing it live.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. And I know what you mean. And that's the other thing I learned. We don't know much about EVPs, and I'm sure sound engineers. Matter of fact, there's an experiment at some point tonight I'd like to lay out. We had a little bit of breakthrough on as to how EVPs might be able to manifest on a recorder, but there's as we get into it, there's a lot of weirdness about sound and why this works, and there's not a lot of answers, and maybe it's just me. I don't know, because I'm not a sound engineer. Maybe the sound engineer could easily answer this, but I don't know. But one point you bring up, getting an EVP in your bedroom at home is way different than me getting an EVP in some graveyard that I get to jump in my truck and leave. You know what I mean? Like, I would never do an EVP session in my house. There's just no way in the world I would do
Right.
that.
I recommend that to a lot of people, too, that think that they've got paranormal activity taking place. They're like, should I try to record it? I say, certainly not. If you don't want this activity in your house, by turning the light on, you're letting them know that you're setting the intention that it's okay to communicate. And it's usually best to have somebody, a third party, come in, and a disinterested party that,
Right.
would look at this and do the recording, so they realize that the spirits may then either, follow them for communication, or realize that the only time that they should be trying this is when there's somebody else there that is not the family members.
Exactly. And the other problem is, some of these guys I get EVPs from, they're just jokers. Sometimes they're saying things to get a rise out of me. It doesn't mean they know more than me, or they have ESP or anything like that. And I'm always afraid one of these guys, kind of like joking around or being a knucklehead, will say something to my homeowner where they're not comfortable sleeping in their house anymore. And that's
Right.
one of the rules we have. When we do a ghost hunt for somebody, it's always like, look, nothing can come up where you don't feel good about sleeping here. So we either need to agree ahead of time that I have the ability to censor, like if I get something odd that sounds bad, maybe not pass it on, but we need to agree ahead of time on how we're going to handle this. Because if you're going to be more uncomfortable in your house, I don't really want to do that.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's been a big aspect of this. Although I've never found that they, I joke around too with people, and I tell them, listen, spirits may just be sarcastic or silly. And if I decide to stay as a ghost and you're trying to do electronic voice phenomena, and I know that you're jittery and freaked out, I can guarantee you that I'm going to lean in and say, get out, or I want your soul. I'm going to be a goof just to try to spook you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're now facing the Dark Lord and the presence of evil. It just means that this ghost is a smartass with a funny sense of humor, and especially if you've shown no other indications of such. But that's been a big problem, and I we'll talk about this more as the show progresses. As you go in and get calls to do these investigations, I've had to go in on cleanup way too often, where some quote unquote paranormal team has gone in and in an hour or 90 minutes has discerned that they have an evil force in their house. I said, you can't get that kind of unless you are literally being grabbed by an imaginary force and thrown up against the wall, or not imaginary, but unseen force. You can't make a call like that on a few noises or knocks or scrapings on the wall. There's so much more that goes into it, but I watch how terrified homeowners can be. And really, people just want reassurance. And there's been a lot of times where I get the call and we'll just talk to the family over the phone. And once I kind of allay their fears of what it is that they may be dealing with, many times they don't need a visit. They're able to then be okay with it, or I give them the tools on what they can do to try to set boundaries and rules and keep these things from bothering them. Is it psychological and working as a placebo effect? Perhaps. Or perhaps the spirit realm does work in a sense of respect, and once they realize you're frightening me or this is unwanted, they leave you alone once you've set that intention bar. Have you found that in many of the cases you've done, or do you run into true dark, evil, malevolent presence?
No, I agree with you. Matter of fact, I had a gentleman contact me not too long ago to check his house out, and he was sure he had a demon. And I go, well, look, I'm a ghost hunter, but I'm not a demon guy. I have no expertise in. I don't even know what a demon is, really. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know anything about that world. So I don't know if you do have a demon. I don't know that I'm the right guy to call. But I said to him, just almost before I hung up, I said, why do you think you have a demon? And he goes, well, I keep taking these pictures through my sliding door on the back of my house at night. And then he gets the reflection of the flash in the glass, and then he blows them up, and in this distorted pareidoia bubble, he can see like demon faces. And I said, well, send them to me. So he sends them to me, and they're obviously just, it was like looking at clouds or something. You know what I mean? You could just, your imagination, you could make something appear. So I decided to do the investigation because I didn't believe there was anything demonic about it. And there was a gentleman that died in the house, and it was the same guy that built the house. And it's funny because the guy I'm dealing with, he's married to the woman of the house, and this woman, this is her past husband. So we did an EVP session, very uneventful. You know how boring ghost hunts can be. But we did get one EVP, and we made a comment about, we heard you built the house. It looks like you did a good job. And I forget what he said. He either said thank you or something along those lines. And then there was one other thing where we got a banging sound in the hallway. And when I did the presentation to the people, I said, we got, this here, this thank you. It sounds like the guy, Paul. And we got this bang, but we don't know what this is. And the guy listens to it, and he goes, oh, I know exactly what it is. And he jumps up, and he grabs this, like, Glade air freshener that hangs on the wall in the bathroom. And I think every half hour it makes this clunking noise, and it makes the spray come out or something. I go, okay, well, that's what that was then. And that was about it on that. But no, I agree with you 100%, Dave.
And we're just about out of time in the segment. We'll come back and discuss more about this, but I want to hear about some of the weirder investigations you've done, some of the ones that have even left you scratching your head, and then we've got some EVP, electronic voice phenomena, that you're going to share with our audience. We'll do that when we return. I'm Dave Schrader. This is Midnight in the Desert. Discussing voices from beyond, recording disembodied voices. Now, that's electronic voice phenomena. There are other forms. There is direct voice phenomena. That's when you are hearing the voice out loud. You don't need to play back a recorder in order to hear it. And the strange thing, and I'd like your opinion on this as well, Dean Warsing, our guest, I have heard direct voice phenomena that does not record. And then you've got electronic voice phenomena, which is answers that record that you don't hear audibly. And that's a strange world to me. And, I've talked to Bill Chappell, the engineer, and he said, if the voice is coming in on a electromagnetic field, that would be what would impress itself upon the tape or the digital recording. If you're hearing it out loud, the digital recorder might not necessarily pick it up because it's coming in a different audible waveform than what we would normally hear. We can hear in different levels and in different ways. Some things are going to be picked up by recorders, some will not. But have you had many encounters with direct voice phenomena where you're hearing the speaking out loud?
Out of all the hours, the many, many hours spent in graveyards and different haunted locations, probably 3 times. And they can go 2 ways. I can hear it with my ear and maybe not get it on the tape at all. Or I can hear it with my ear and get it on the tape. I've had that both ways. But, maybe we should talk about the alley experiment real quick here, because this is right up this alley. In my class, we're always pondering, what is an EVP? I mean, electronic voice phenomena, it suggests that the entity can manipulate the electromagnetic field. It never was a sound wave, and it's just implanted right on your recorder. I'm doing an experiment right now where I have 2 recorders exactly the same, synced up together. One has its mic on, and then the other one's set on external mic with no external mic plugged in. So essentially, it can't record anything sound wave-wise. And then the experiment is to play them both, and if I get EVPs on one or the other, that's going to give me some kind of suggestion either way. The other thing is we talk about EVPs could be infrasonic, like beyond human hearing, but yet the recorder can pick it up. So I went out and bought a dog whistle, and I blow the dog whistle, and I can hear like wind rushing through it as I blow it with my ears. And I look at my dog's responding to the whistle. I know there's some kind of frequency getting her to get up out of her bed and look at me cockeyed, and then record it at the same time. When I play it on my tape or on my recorder, it sounds exactly the same as what I heard with my ear. Now, this is why
right, because you're still recording the same frequency. So theoretically, if you could hear it on a recording, there's something weird about that.
This is where it gets really weird. Okay, so I'm in my class the other night, and we're having the same exact talk about how EVPs manifest. And I remembered that when my daughter was a teenager, there was an app you could download, and it says anybody under 25, when you play this, it'll drive them crazy, but anybody over 25 can't even hear it. So I'm around my daughter, and I get my phone out, and I click it on, and she's like, "Oh, what is that? That's horrible." And we're like, "What? What do you hear?" She goes, "You guys can't hear that? That is horrible. It sounds horrible. Turn it off." Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Me and the wife, we can't hear it, but we're over 25. So I tell that story to my class. Now, it just so happens that this class, one of the students is a mother, and she's taken prior classes. And since I'm daughter, and her daughter's named Allie, and Allie's a teenager. She called me up and she said, look, on this class, Allie would really like to come take the class. Do you mind? I said, no, I don't mind. So I've never had a teenager in my class before. So I tell this story about the frequency that anybody over 25 can't hear, and Allie immediately goes to YouTube, and she finds some video where you can play where you can't hear it if you're over 25. And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know she did this. So I'm just talking, and she goes, can anybody hear that? Oh, that's horrible. Nobody can, and everybody else in the class is over 25, and none of us can hear it. Only Allie, the teenager. So I said, Allie, continue playing it. Let me turn my recorder on. Turn my recorder on. I said, are you playing it? And she goes, yeah. Oh, wait a minute. No, yeah, right here. And she plays it. We stop the experiment. I turn my recorder on. I play it. The whole class can hear the frequency. Now, Dave, what is going on? It's been recorded to YouTube, and I can't hear it. But if I record it again onto my recorder, now I can hear it, and everybody else in the class can hear it. And then,
sure, we're using her as a human tuner. She has become the conduit between the audible, and you've now got something that's able to register that sound.
Yeah, but
I'm sorry, did I break you?
Yes, you got my brain just fried a little bit.
I can smell the smoke.
So it's recorded on YouTube, and I can't hear it.
Right.
We record it again, and now I can hear it on the recorder. What has changed about that sound that now I can hear it with my ears?
You've now got what is known as a poltergeist agent involved. You've got somebody who's attuned, and they are becoming like a harmonic resonance for it. You're using them as a tuning fork.
So are you saying, go ahead.
Because she is the one, and you're recording it with her, she's the one hearing it. This is whether it's telepathic or we're audibly now hearing what's in her frequency. I believe she's the difference. It's because she's there. Now, did you remove her from the room and record it again and not hear it? That would be an interesting experiment to me, that if you get somebody that can hear it and then you can record it while they're hearing it and then remove them from the element and it goes away, that would start to lead me to believe that, okay, this is somebody that's going to be, interesting to record around. This is going to be somebody that we can use as a switchboard. So that would be the way I would treat it, right?
You're saying that it manifested on my recorder because of Allie.
I believe so, yes. That's why when you're in the presence of some people, activity goes crazy. And when you're with other people who are kind of these void characters, I mean, I've gone into places that are known to be remarkably haunted, and you go in with that one negative guy, oh, nothing ever happens around me. Well, I'm a ghost jinx. And you go in with them and nothing happens, yet every group before and after you has some experience in that room. Are they just crazy and you're the logical one, or did you bring a cooler in, the dampener?
Right.
And when you're with some of these people that, it's like I'm not a fan of orbs or orb photography, but I'll be around somebody like Chris Fleming, and Chris will hold his hands up and say, take a photograph here. And you take a photograph, and perfectly positioned between his hands is this light anomaly. And then he goes, now take one over here. And you just hold the camera in the same place, and he puts his hand out to the side like he's holding a serving tray, and this light anomaly appears on his hand. Now you're using him as a focal point. You're using what he's picking up and sensing, and I think he becomes part of boosting the transmission of what he is experiencing. So in some cases, cameras, electronics and audio recorders will start to you're bringing them into an atmosphere that is relatable again, because there's one person that has that ability to bridge you to that realm. Now, this is, again, all speculation, but it makes sense to me, because I can go with some people and have crazy experiences and go with others and have nothing in the exact same place at the exact same time. It's I don't know how else to explain something like that.
That's very interesting. And you know what? I will. This week, I have a class, same people, and we'll do it. We'll do it with Allie, and then we'll dismiss her from the room and do it again and see if we...
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it. And please, report back. Let us know what you were able to find, and we'll update that on an upcoming show, maybe even just to have you on for a few minutes
Sure.
to play the audio. And, understandable, we'll play it, and maybe you can even send over the link to Keith and I of the audio so that we can play it on air of nothing, of the whistle that most of us probably won't hear. And then, we'll ask our listeners to see if they can hear and who can and when. And then we'll play the audio from your recording session with Allie and see if we can hear it, again, being played. And then what happens when you remove her from the element again? Have you done this on more than one occasion, re-recorded with her in the room or nearby while that audio is playing?
This was just discovered 2 weeks ago. It was the first time that we did it. And then since then, we've had a snow date, and we had Thanksgiving, so I haven't been back to college. It'll be this week we go back, and we'll redo the experiment just to have a good copy of it. The audio I have on it now could be much better, actually.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to see what goes on with the follow-up experiment, so please keep us in mind for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love when we can challenge perceptions. And all right, if this is what is being said, this is what's being done, and we believe that EVP exists in this realm of hearing, what can we do to get ourselves into that realm? That's why I don't want to beat the drum too loud for Bill Chappell, but as a friend and somebody who actually respects what he does, I love that he looks at what people believe, and then he tries to create technology that will measure what people believe to see if, in fact, all right, if you believe that audio in the EVP range can be heard between here and here, I'm going to bolster the recording ability so that we can pick up in that realm. And do I get better responses? He created something called the reverse EVP, the REVP, which, again, I thought was genius. You would pre-record a set of questions on one recorder, and then you plug this into the headphone output of another recorder, and you push play. And you won't physically hear the questions playing back, but if you have another audio recorder nearby, it will pick up those questions because it's transmitting it into an electromagnetic frequency. And then on that second recorder, you're listening to the questions, and then you're hearing the response. So,
interesting.
Right. And I've been in places like that where we've tried it. I had this really fun experiment when we were in, it was an old pub, and the owner was very classic and liked all the Sinatra stuff and all the old, 30s and 40s music. And as a joke, my buddy plugged in his REVP to his iPhone and started playing like Anthrax. And we had a recorder going. And the recorder was far enough away, but it was sitting on the bar near where the guy used to stand. And all of a sudden you hear this voice, this very irritable voice go, "What the hell is that?"
Wow.
So you're transmitting into that realm. Now, was it transmitting through time? I would love to know, when this guy was alive, was he ever hearing things in his own bar? And if he was it us transmitting to him?
Right.
Was he sitting there cleaning up one night and all, 2:00 in the morning closing time, and he starts hearing, right? It's like, what the hell is going on?
What the hell is that? Yeah.
and then it's just gone. Or, is this being transmitted to the realm where, the alternate verse or the parallel universe exists and it's bleeding through? But I've seen some really interesting responses in doing that, engaging that. And for people that are interested, just go check out digitaldowsing.com, digitaldowsing.com. And you can find most of Bill's equipment there. And if he doesn't have the REVP up anymore, just email him through the site, and it might be something that he has a couple around that he can release to you. But being a fan of electronic voice phenomena, that was a tool that I really like to employ, and I like messing with it to see what we could get and try to communicate. Because the problem is, do you just have to be in the right scope at the right time where they can physically hear you out loud? And are they answering, but we're just not tuned into the right frequency to hear their responses? This seems to be bringing those two parallels a little bit closer.
Yeah. What I'm finding here in Maryland, Dave, is that something changes in the environment that makes it very non-conducive. I've tried
All right, I
going
need
out
you to hold
normally.
up again for me. You're getting your caller your caller deal is buzzing through again. Call waiting. So you're
Really?
chopping up. Yeah. Are you getting a call? Are you hearing that beeping
No,
as
I'm
well?
not. I'm
Okay.
I'm not. But I'm
It's
wondering if
cyclical. All of a sudden, we start to hear this clipping, and it's just like it's like a phone ring, an
right.
imaginary phone ringing. I just hear your voice
Yeah.
like this.
Anytime it occurs, I just tell me and I'll start over.
All
It's not
right,
a problem.
so let's take it back for a second and go back at what you were starting to say.
Yeah, what I'm finding is in Maryland here, there's something in the environment that changes that makes it much more non-conducive to get EVPs. So now when I go out and I do EVPs, I keep a logbook and I look at the temperature, I look at the humidity, I look at the barometric pressure, I look at the KP index, and it seems like there's one other thing I take. But I'm guessing I'm trying to put a correlation between when they're talking. I think they're talking all the time. I only think we can pick it up when environmental conditions are just right to do so. At least that seems true in Maryland. Now, so far, and this is inconclusive, but I think it's humidity. And this last year, we went through a very wet summer and winter. And I really believe, like, when it gets so dry in your environment to where you can't hardly go across the carpet and get shocked on a doorknob, or you go to get in your truck and you get shocked, I think when you have very dry spells like that, I think they're more conducive to getting paranormal phenomena, and that might even be ghosts showing themselves to you or whatever. Matter of fact, Joshua P. Warren talks about one of the ways to get rid of ghostly activity is to run a humidifier inside your house. So that seems to be universally true for other phenomena, and I think it might be true for EVPs. But at some point, I want to crack what it is in
See, now
Maryland.
that kind of surprises me because I would think that having more humidity in the air would make it sound more palpable, would make it easier to hear.
Well, it probably would as far as a transmission medium, but it seems they're dead in the water before they start. It's almost like, David, like the Earth is a big capacitor, and somehow they can suck that juice off and use it. Matter of fact, this is a great time to bring this up. A lot of my recordings have a popping sound in them, or it almost sound like a ball being dropped in a tube, like a doo 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 doo. And I tell my class, I mean, this is conjecture on my part, I call it a dimensional pop, where they're like popping into our dimension and leaving sound for us. Or it could be just an energy transfer. I mean, I'm guessing at this point, but it's in more EVPs than not, and it's something we need to address because all my equipment is digital. I don't have anything that has moving parts. There shouldn't be any popping noises. There shouldn't be any like ball bouncing. And I'll point it out tonight, and several of them, and it's pretty profound. But anyway, if the Earth was like a big capacitor, and they use that energy, that static charge, when it's wet out, it's like it's grounded out the whole time, so they can't use it. There's nothing left in the battery. And this is just a guess at this point. It's still, not done the experiment yet, because the truth is the dead haven't came back and been talking to me like they did a year and a half ago. I would go out for 15 minutes and probably have 8 to 10 things I'd have to investigate on a good day. And then I can go out handfuls of time. Matter of fact, Thanksgiving Day was the first time I got 2 EVPs in probably 4 months.
Why do you think that is? I've run into other investigators who have been very proficient at getting electronic voice phenomena that run into these dry spells as well, where it's like no matter what, they get no response anymore. Do you think it does have to do with the weather and different atmospheric changes, or do you think
I do?
It could be you as well? Is there something more going on in your life, a higher level of stress, something else that you've maybe changed in the way that you do investigating that may be putting you into a different, I hate that term frequency because it seems to be overused, but could there be an aspect of that as well?
Well, sure. All those things are possible. I mean, I even went as far as to think, is my hearing maybe getting worse? And I'm just not picking them up when I listen to the tapes. And then I thought, are they getting bored of me? Are they like, that's that stupid guy again. Yeah, let's get out of here before he starts asking all those dumb questions. Like, am I boring them? Do they, you know what I mean? Because I go to a lot of the same places. but now I think, and both of those things might be true also, but now I think it's an environmental thing. I think once here in Maryland that it dries out and humidity levels are lower, I think I'm going to see EVPs come back better and better. Like I said, Thanksgiving was a decent day here as far as humidity goes, and I got 2 EVPs. One, I said, if you can move physical objects where I'm at, can you tap my recorder 3 times? And I got tap, tap, tap. And then actually,
now that should be noted as well. That's not really electronic voice phenomena. Again, voices are the recording of disembodied voices. Is there a terminology for that when you're picking up audio of things that are taking place that we're not hearing? Footsteps, coughing, something like that.
Yeah, they call it EAP, and it stands for electronic audio phenomena. And like if you pick up really technically, like you said, footsteps or tapping or a dog barking, they're really, well, the dog I guess is arguable if that's a voice or not, but anything that's a sound and not necessarily a voice would be a EAP.
All right, so you get the tapping. And
yeah, I get the tap. Go ahead.
So this is telling you that something intelligent is there interacting with you, because my first thought was if you're getting more on Thanksgiving, maybe that's because it's the time of the year. There's more heightened anxiety. There's more heightened love or energy on holidays like that. I wonder if you could get more EVP, just like the background EVP, the residual conversations heard more on those days than you would on others, because it is more active and there's more energy at those points in history at the locations.
I would definitely agree that like events like that have more energy for most people on the planet. I mean, they're special times, and for me, it's a different kind of energy. I mean, you almost conjure up feelings that you had as a child, and family, and all that good stuff, and it's a strong energy. So it might be, Dave. It could be. And then the other one I said, "Will you bake a pumpkin pie today?" And the EVP just said, "Can't." So I was like, okay.
Now, I think isn't that one of the audio bits that you sent to us?
No, it wasn't worth developing. I didn't send it in, that one.
Okay, I thought I'd seen something along that line. I know we've only got a few minutes, about 4 minutes left in the segment. We come back after the top of the hour. I would like to open it back up to a little bit more of this discussion, but then hearing some of the stories behind the recordings that you sent over to us.
Sure.
You've sent a list of I think we've got about 17. We've got 20 that you sent to us. Some we're going to eliminate because of the context of the language. And although it is subjective and left up to the interpretation of the audience, we don't want to leave it up to the interpretation of the FCC, because their fines are much heavier than the etheric plane. So we do have those, and maybe what we can do is, with your permission, Dean, is make that available on our website so they can go to our website and hear those 3 EVP that we're not going to play on the air tonight. Would that be okay?
Oh, that would be fun. That would be fun.
Keith,
yep.
and I'll see if we can get Keith's permission on that. I know we like to try to keep the website family friendly, but again, since it is subjective and there's no fines for people listening to that on the website, maybe we can make those available that way for you. So we'll talk about putting those up and doing that. We've got about 3 minutes left in the segment, so I don't want to get too deep into any one of these aspects, but give me one of your favorite weird paranormal experiences. What has been one of the most active sites you've ever been to?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the great, haunted sites that Zach Bagans and a lot of these guys on TV and stuff get to go to, I don't have access to. Most of my stuff is I'm either invited until somebody's home, or I do a lot of graveyards. A lot of my work is done in graveyards. And it's interesting, Dave, in that a lot of the EVPs I get are contemporary and intelligent beings. Like last year, it was Christmas Eve. I was out in a graveyard, and I said, will you celebrate Christmas this year? And the guy goes, tomorrow. Like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Right.
Yeah. So it's not as if I don't think they're imprints. I think they're just real people without a meat body. Why they're in the graveyard? That's a whole discussion in itself. I mean, why would you hang out at a graveyard?
Yeah, right.
Right. And it could be that as a spirit, you can have maybe attention stuck there just in case somebody comes to your grave. You might not literally be there like we think of you and I being there, but they almost might have like a sensor piece there. It can alert them if anybody's around, and they're, on a spiritual realm, who knows? I mean, it could be
I'm sorry, you're chopping out on us again. What was that last segment you said?
I say most people believe that they have a higher self, when they're on the earth living a regular life. So it appears as a spirit that you can be in more than one place, possibly.
I know when my mom was passing, she was a huge fan of the paranormal and understanding this as well. And she had encouraged me to record around her in her last few days because we'd heard of these deathbed visitations. So there were times that I would run recorders while she and I had some nice conversation and talked about some memories. I wanted to just have some of those audio bits of her and I having our final discussions. And I listened back to see if there was anything strange, and there wasn't. But the fascinating aspect was when I asked my mom, have you seen anything? Have you been visited yet? She said no. And that would make sense then to what was, her experience. There was no, family members popping in and out of her room. She wasn't ever entering that realm. And I don't know if it's because she just, slipped away too quickly once the final time came and there wasn't that one last connection. But, it was in that moment trying to see if there was any other sounds. And I was actually kind of a little surprised that there wasn't, but in a sense relieved as well, because it's one of those things you think you'd like to hear. I don't know how I would have dealt with it. And when we come back, I'd like to know if there were experiences. Were there EVP that even maybe ones you didn't share tonight that you wish you hadn't caught? We'll talk about that when we return. I'm Dave Schrader. This is Midnight in the Desert. Welcome back to the show. Midnight in the Desert is underway. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Joining me in the third hour, Ellen Everett Hopman. We'll be talking about the Witching Hour, looking into the history and stories of druids and witchcraft through the past through modern day. We'll do that in the third hour of tonight's show. Right now, we're talking about voices from beyond. Dean Worsing, our guest, as we talk about electronic voice phenomenon. Again, this is something that interests me, and I know we did a show few months back on this, and people really seem to enjoy hearing some of the audio. So he brought along about 17 pieces of audio we can play, and then we'll try to put 3 other pieces of audio up with a little bit more saltier language on our website. So if you go to Dean's banner on tonight's program, we'll have that up and ready for you, I believe, and let you get a chance to hear those 3 segments as well. Before the break, I was just asking about some of the other weird scenarios and stories, and has there ever been a piece of audio you've collected that you just kind of wish you hadn't? And to kind of preface that, I was at the Farnsworth House in Gettysburg, and we had a long night of investigating. And I was in this last group, and there were only about 5 or 6 troopers that stayed through, and we were doing some electronic voice phenomena up in the attic of this place. And it was hot, and everybody was tired and getting crabby, and we were standing in a circle. And I decided to start asking questions outside the normal. I started asking about death. Did it hurt? Was there anybody there to greet you? Is there a God? And when we got back to that segment, you hear the questions and there's no answer, no answer, no answer. And then I go, is there a God? And this very clear voice goes, no.
Wow.
And it was the only response I got. And we all just stopped and froze in that moment. First of all, it's this heart-sinking moment. And then you could hear the next couple of questions, because we do what's called short burst EVP sessions, where you ask 5 to 10 questions, play it back. That way, if you're engaging a spirit and they're responding, you don't record it and then go home and then find out that they were responding and needed help or needed something or had a message and you just never got around to it. So we would do these back, hearing that voice, this no. And we're all accounted for. We're all standing there facing each other. One of us would have noticed another one saying no out loud, and it wasn't a whispery tone. But what's really strange is we played it back. The voice was not on the tape.
Wow, that's such a shame.
Right.
Yeah.
And but that left us even more disturbed, and it was kind of really uncomfortable. But that, to me, that was one moment of, that's the one piece of audio I wish I wouldn't have heard. It was alarming and disarming to hear that. What about you?
Well, along those lines, it's funny. Early on, I used to ask a lot of religious questions. Have you met God? Have you seen an angel? I don't get any hits on any of that stuff. Just nothing. It's just dead on that stuff for some reason. I haven't really got anything, an EV. I'm trying to think. I mean, I probably have, and it's not coming to me, but nothing comes to mind that I wasn't happy that I got. There wasn't something so creepy I went, oh, my God, that's just too creepy. But with that being said, I do an annual Halloween ghost hunt at a place called historic Elk Landing, and it's a nonprofit place, and we do a ghost hunt there and take the public through there, and they get to keep all the money, and it helps them preserve it. It's a really cool place, and it's old, and it's got some haunted stuff going on. But we never had an age restriction on anybody that comes in there to do a ghost hunt with me. And I mean, I get a lot of kids. I'll get 9 and 10, 11-year-old kids, and they love it. They just love it. They eat it up. And I never gave any disclaimers or anything. I always kind of looked at ghost hunting as kind of safe. I never really had anything happen to me. But then just this year, I had me and another investigator, we were at a house in Habity Grace, Maryland. And in this house, it was partially burned at one time from the War of 1812. The British tried to burn it down. So it was an old place. And investigators floor the base.
All right, hold on one second. We're getting that strange interruption again. So please pick back up.
Yeah, so my investigator was on the first floor. I went down into the basement. And this guy was moving in from New Jersey, and he had apprehensions about bringing his mom in because he thought there was something in the house. That's why he wanted us to do the ghost hunt. So about 30 minutes later, I come up from the basement, and I look at my investigator, and I can tell by looking at him something spooked him. And I said, what's going on? He goes, well, I was kind of squatted in the living room there doing an EVP session, and he goes, a hand came up and pushed me backwards, and I fell down on my butt. And I said, well, did you mark it on the tape? He goes, no, but you'll know where it's at because my boot hits the floor pretty hard, made a big noise. And the interesting thing about that is there was an EVP that accompanied that guy falling over. You actually, that's number 17. We'll play it later. But there's an interesting EVP that accompanies that. And then, I don't know, this summer I was at a graveyard, and I had my recorder up against the church. It's a nice sunny day. It's not even at night. And I'm doing an EVP session, and about 4 minutes in, I feel something sting the back of my right arm. And I didn't know if I got stung by a bee or what, but I reached back there, and I could feel 2 welts coming up where I have like a 5 or 6 inch long double scratch on the back of my arm. And I was like, oh, wow. And I kind of looked at my tape, and I was wondering if there would be an EVP that would accompany being scratched. Got finished up, got my truck, looked in the rearview mirror, and I'm like, yeah, I'm scratched real well. I took a picture of it. I actually sent you guys a picture. And then later, I don't know if it was later that night. So again, if people go check out midnightinthedesert.com and click on our guest's banner, on Dean's banner tonight, you'll see these photographs that he's referring to. Yeah, and then I took another one. I don't remember if it was the next day or that night. It just had changed color a little bit. You could see it but I actually still have scars on my arm where that occurred. So anyway, since those two things have happened, I kind of give a little disclaimer now. Just to be complete, I want to be honest with people. I'm just like, ghost hunting's pretty safe, but, I have had a couple things happen. You need to do this, especially with your children at your own discretion, and just make sure they know exactly what they're getting into because, Dave, there's another story. Brad Staggart talked about provoking. And I guess as a teenager, he worked at a restaurant or some place where he'd have to go downstairs and get supplies. And the room that these supplies were in, some kind of entity would push the door shut and hold him in there until it felt like letting him out. So it got to the point where he wouldn't go down into the basement of this establishment unless he had about 6 other kids with him. And he said this one particular time, 2 of the kids were like 200-pound football players, and they're holding the door open to this room as Brad gets his supplies, and I think there was like 4 other kids just doing like a lookout. And as he walks out of the room, he says to the football players, go ahead and shut the blah, blah, blah door if that's what that blah, blah thing wants, kind of mouthing off to it. They make their way up to the steps. I don't remember the story. The door either busted open or busted off its hinges, and then all 6 kids were elevated a foot off the ground and then dropped back down. So that's the problem with provoking. You don't know what you're provoking. To be scratched in the arm is one thing, but right. To be, something's power enough to lift you off the ground. So I don't really provoke anymore. And when I did provoke, it was because I was getting bored and I didn't think anything was happening. And what I'd do is I'd just be less polite about my questions. They might be more sexual content or something you wouldn't say in good company. I mean, and that's a problem when you ghost hunt. If I'm talking to a proper woman and I say, did you have sex today, or do you still pee, or something like that, you may lose her. She may just walk off because she's a lady. You know what I mean? So you always have to make sure. Most of the time, it's best to be kind of respectful to your audience, and I think you'll probably get more out of them by being nice to them.
Right. Ghosts were people too. I often tell people that when they come in to hear me do presentations on paranormal investigating, and I've gotten much more response being kind and polite and respectful. And I know people will throw the show Ghost Adventures under the bus for being provokers, but if you actually watch the show, they provoke in places that they are not such nice spirits, that they're spirits that have been known to attack or terrify people, more of the demonic like characters, malevolent spirits. That's who they're trying to provoke to get some kind of activity from. So that is part of the story that people need to take into effect. But yeah, if you open up and you bust into somebody's house and start throwing threats around and challenging, you're most likely either going to get no response or you're going to get something vile or maybe physical in nature. I went with a paranormal investigation team into an old antebellum mansion in Georgia about 12 years ago, and they wanted to show me how professional their team was. And they were Southern folk. And I was really astonished by how rude they were in this house. First of all, this house had once been taken over by the North as a stronghold, and the family was forced to kind of they were allowed to live there, but they were kind of forced into a couple of rooms in this huge mansion. They were not treated politely, and I watched them, and they couldn't get any EVP. And I said, I go, well, what do you think? I mean, this place is great. And I said, yeah, but boy, are you rude. And they're like, what? And I said, whatever happened to Southern hospitality? And they all kind of laughed. And I said, no, seriously, if we're talking to somebody from the 1800s, wouldn't you introduce yourself? And wouldn't you maybe give them a comp? So we did a few EVP sessions where we started getting responses, where I began with, I just wanted to thank you for allowing us into your home. This is a beautiful place. Yeah. I can see why you would want to stay. My name is David, and I would love the opportunity to get to know you. Would you please tell me your name? And then just kind of encourage that conversation. And it took probably a good half an hour, 45 minutes before we started getting audible responses. But it changed the atmosphere of the room. And once you realize that, know the history of where you're at. People will go in and, some woman was brutally beaten to death or died there. And then you're in there demanding things from her. That's the last thing in that realm she's going to want to deal with. So it's, compassion, love, empathy that seems to show better results in these cases. So whether you believe you're communicating with the dead or not, just showing love and compassion is a much better way to try to get some kind of response from people. And, being intrusive in their home or their work or into their lives and demanding they act like a monkey and, move this, light that up, spring this up, scream, yell, do these things. I always try to encourage, out of the box questions. Hey, when you were a child, what was your favorite game? Did you play that game with your sisters or brothers? Who you can tell me secretly, who was your favorite sibling? I won't tell anyone. And just trying to encourage different questions instead of, what's your name? Who's your daddy? To me, that just starts to get boring, first of all, for me. And I can only guess in some of these locations how many times paranormal investigators have been through there asking the same thing. And when you open a different realm and a different sign of respect that you actually care and want response, I think that's why I've been pretty successful at getting some responses. It doesn't mean I still don't ask some of the general questions, but I do try to really convince people to take time to think before they get there of the type of questions they would want to know. Not just what year is it. What year you believe the people are there. You can talk to them about what are their thoughts on the president, not who is the president, but, what are your thoughts on the president at this time? Are you disappointed that this war is taking place? Or do you believe that it was being fought for the right reasons? And that's a different kind of question to pose in these situations and scenarios. Sure. So that's always been something I've encouraged when people want to understand how to go out and investigate and elicit these responses. Now, you've got quite a few responses. So let's start. I've got my list sitting in front of me. The first piece of audio, Stay. Why don't you give us a little bit of the background on this and where you were?
Yeah, this is not a great EVP because I usually like it when there's a question and then I get an intelligent answer. But I like this one because somebody just saddled up next to me and says, stay. And I've gotten this more than once, believe it or not. It might be the same person. But the sound of the voice, it's so surreal, so ghostly-like. And remember, they're making these noises one way or the other without a tongue or lips or a voice box on some spiritual plane. And, to me, it sounds very ghostly.
All right, this is the first audio, Stay. Let's play that one more time since I was talking over at the first round. All right, very clear. Now, for people that are listening and say, well, Dean, are you sure that wasn't your voice? How do you make sure to note these moments when you're recording so that you can verify that it's not your voice or somebody else that's with you?
Yeah, so since I teach a class on this, we take major precautions on how to conduct an EVP session. Like a lot of times when I go out with other investigators, the first thing we do is split up because we don't want to cross-contaminate each other's tape. The other thing is we don't necessarily want to stay together because then you're editing two tapes that sound exactly the same. So we split up a football field or more away from each other. The other thing is when you're investigating, I mean, if you want to do this as a good investigator and be honest, and this is the only way to do it, because if you're being sloppy and stuff, it just takes so much away from it. But anytime you're in the field and your stomach growls or you hear something, it's called spill through, and we mark it on tape. Spill through. I could hear a little girl down the road laughing, or spill through. My stomach growled. So we take a lot of precautions about that. The other thing is there's certain things we don't do during an EVP session. Like a big no-no is to whisper, and it's counterintuitive. People do it they do it without thinking about it. But that's the last thing you want to do because it's the most easiest thing that could be mistaken for an EVP. So, and the other thing is, we use a recorder where we can measure the sounds in the environment only because it has a sound bar. And we've tried to put ourselves in environments where the environment itself is only taken up about 25% of that sound bar. When we ask a question, about 50% with the environment. That gives us another 50% for the EVP if we want to audibly make it higher so we can hear it better or what have you. And if we stick to those rules, we seem to get good EVPs.
All right, our next EVP, where was this, and what would you like to tell us about this story?
Well, one of the reasons I do this work, Dave, is I'm always interested in what is it like when I'm going to drop my body. Am I going to eat food? Am I going to be with friends? Am I going to have pets? Am I going to have sex? So, and on this one I asked, do people divorce? And they said, Ralphie Newberry.
People divorce where you're at? People divorce where you're at?
Okay, what is that in context to the conversation? Had Ralphie Newberry divorced?
That poor sap got divorced, I guess, and everybody knows it. But I looked in the graveyard for that name, and I've Googled that name. I can't find anything on old Ralphie Newberry. So
play it one more time for me. One more time.
People divorce where you're at?
Yeah, I thought maybe you had misheard it. Maybe it was something of, you just never marry. But no, that's not even the audio that's coming through. Ralphie Newberry, that's a weird response of any kind of answer.
It's a weird name.
That. Yeah.
I mean, I think of Ralphie in Christmas Story, but besides that, I don't think I've ever met a Ralphie.
Yeah. Ralphie Newberry. All right. Have you looked at that location? There's websites like brideandhouse.com to see if there's anybody that shows in the provenance of that property that might be named Ralph. And would that make sense?
Yeah, this was an Ebenezer Church graveyard. And I kind of looked around at all the stones and couldn't find Ralphie. And I actually go there quite a bit, and I still haven't found Ralphie. So not sure on that one. Not sure.
All right, audio number 3. Here you are, getting a little promiscuous in your questioning, and the answer sounds like it's just as playful back.
Yes, men. It seems that men will be men if they're dead or alive. And I'm happy to hear they have sex. I think that's a wonderful thing in the afterlife if that continues. But basically, I asked, "Do you have sex?" And the guy says, "Like a hound." But the way he says it, it's like a hound. It's like split up a little bit.
You have sex? You have sex?
All right. Like a hound. Well, at least, at least we know that there's some enjoyment still taking place in the afterlife. All right.
Yeah.
Here comes a quintessential EVP. Number 4. Where were you and what was the story behind Help Me?
This one, I don't recall where I was, but it is the EVP that everybody gets, it seems like. So that's why I included it. It's your staple Help Me EVP. Now, Dave, sorry about that. Actually, I forgot. There's another reason I pop.
All right, hold on. You're chopping up and in and out on us again. So there was another reason that you included this EVP. You started to say, what was that?
Yeah. Okay, now?
No, it's going a little longer than it normally does, but I think we're clear. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so in that one, Help Me, that dimensional pop where the ball sounds like it's being dropped in the tube is present in that. I think it's right in between the Help and Me.
And it's interesting you bring that up because there have been people, Mark and Debbie Constantino being two of the investigators I worked with for a number of years, that would talk about this kind of this popping noise that they started to realize happened before most really good EVP. It was almost as though it was a transmission or like something crackling to life just before it would come through, something pushing through. So let's go ahead and play that 2 more times where neither one of us are speaking and we can hear this. Now I'm hearing the help. I'm not really hearing the pop on that one. I don't know if it's been maybe too closely edited, but help definitely sounds like it's coming through. Now,
what I'm hearing. Go ahead. I was going to say I hear the help, then I hear that like dimensional pop, then I hear the Me, and then I hear some crows. But
yeah, damn crows, always getting in the way.
Always problem.
All right,
always
number 5. Now you've got what you believe to be some kind of Native American language.
Yeah, we don't always get English. I don't know what this is. This is just a guess on my part. It sounds Indian to me, and it's kind of weird, but in the front end of this, there's actually a little bit of a growl, and then it sounds like this Indian says something. Parkua, but I don't know what that is.
All right. Now, are you sure? Play it one more time for me, Keith. I'm just going to plant, which is the worst thing to do when you're doing this. When you're listening to EVP, usually you don't want to give people the what they think they're going to hear, but because we're on radio here, we want to speed this along. That's why we're giving you some of the information up front. But I'm just curious because I'm not hearing a defining word in there to even realize that it's Native American or perhaps another language. Let me hear it again one more time, dry. Okay, now that could sound to me like, in the media, it sounds like found you. And that having done radio, having done radio for years, our throats make all kinds of weird noises. There's times when I'm sitting here and you don't burp, but all of a sudden you hear this kind of come out of your throat and you're like, where the hell did that come from?
Where's that frog getting in the studio?
Right. I don't know, if it might have been somebody that happened from and you just don't notice it. Maybe where you're holding the recorder is down a little lower, so you're picking up digestive noises that you didn't realize you were picking up. So there are some of those aspects you have to look into as well. But the word itself, now that I plant the word found you in your head, can we play it one more time? See, I think there could be just as much a case as, that as it being a foreign or Native American language.
Okay, yeah.
That's why this, I think, is such a controversial way of investigating is, what we think we go in with or, our perceived notion of it is one thing. We did an episode of Paranormal Challenge, and we were at near Sedona, Arizona, and I can't remember the name of the hotel off the top of my head. My mind is blanking out on it, but we were in Arizona doing this investigation, and the person brought us what he believed to be an EVP in the surgical suite, where he could hear, in his opinion, them saying, "This is where we take the brains out."
Ooh.
Which was really kind of alarming, but it was so clean and crisp. And he kept telling us, it says this is where we take the brains out. And when you listen to it, sure enough, it sounds like this is where you take the brains out. But the voice was so clean. We went back and reviewed the actual video of the investigation. And what's interesting is you notice one investigator pass a notebook to the other, and he sets the notebook down, and the other one says, I'll take the notes from here, which isn't the same cadence or meter. But when you flush your mind of this is where they take the brains out, and you put into your head the concept of, I'll take the notes from here, I'll take the notes from here, and you play it back, you can clearly hear, I'll take the notes from here. And you're thinking, those two sentences don't even sound alike. How can our brain be tricked that definitively? And then you go back and start thinking, this is where they take the brains out, this is where they take the brains out, this is where and then you play it back and you hear, this is where they take the brains out. So it's weird how the mind and the ears work. We can be tricked so easily.
Yeah, and I would never argue with you about what you find to be true about EVP, what you hear. And there's not a class that I give that I'll play some EVPs and the guy go, well, I hear this.
Right.
Okay. I would never argue with that.
But my curiosity was more of why did you, what was the, what about it made you believe that you were hearing something foreign or Native American?
Well, even when you made that suggestion that it was something different, I still hear parkua, and it's just not an English word that I hear that clearly, and I've heard this thing probably a gang of times, and I hear that every time, and it just doesn't sound English to me. That was the only reason.
Right. Well, and it's funny, and we'll discuss a little bit about this. I know you brought up off air talking about an interesting episode I did of Darkness Radio a number of years ago with a gentleman by the name of Ed Azoski, and talking about how fallible we are as people in presenting what we believe to be evidence. We'll talk a little bit about that story, and I'm interested to see why you specifically wanted to bring that up. We'll do that next right here on Midnight in the Desert. All right, we're back. This is Midnight in the Desert. I'm your host, Dave Schrader, and our guest, as we're wrapping up his segment, Dean Warsing. We're talking about Voices from Beyond, recording of disembodied voices, electronic voice phenomena. We've heard quite a few instances of it tonight. It's interesting to me because I do hear a similarity in a lot of the voices, Dean. Do you notice that even though you might be at different locations, there seems to be a similar sound or tonality to that voice? I
agree. And there's a certain quality, and when you listen for EVPs and I know you've done this, Dave. They stick out. They don't sound like normal talking. They just have a quality about them.
Do you think that most mediums will tell you that they're not necessarily talking to Dean's grandfather? They're talking to their own mother, who's relaying the message from Dean's grandfather. Do you think there might be an element of that when we're investigating, that's why these EVP come through in similar voices no matter where we go, and why we may be in Germany doing an EVP session and we're getting the answer in English? Could it be that whoever our translator or guardian is the one that's actually giving us that information, and that's why it's always going to have that same sound to it? Or do you believe that, as you said, there's no lips, there's no tongue, there's no throat for these beings to vocalize, so if it's going to come through, it's going to come through in a very similar manner every time?
I mean, I could make arguments for everything you just said there. I mean, and the unfortunate thing is we just don't know. And I mean, maybe mediums can take us a step closer. If they're truly mediums, they might be able to bring something to the show that we can't see or perceive, but I just don't know. I don't know. I mean, with that being said, they have a quality, but they don't all sound exactly like the same person to me. Like, I think I hear different people.
Okay, right. I'm not saying they all are, but there are a lot of similarities in these voices that make it very interesting. Okay, let's move on through this. And you mentioned Ed Azoski off air. I did an episode on Darkness Radio a number of years ago with Ed Azoski, who was a paranormal investigator, perhaps still is. He fallen off my map after our interview. He spent the first hour of our show tearing apart every paranormal program and every paranormal investigator out there for being lackadaisical, lazy, and not having a proper protocol, and then came out swinging at the top of the second hour with, instead of building up slowly through his collection of EVP, he came out with his holy grail. And he heard this voice that to him was this long dead language. And he had technicians, audio technicians, linguists with 40 years experience that could not crack the code of what this voice was saying. Now he's giving us all this preload. So I'm okay. I'm going to be hearing like a foreign tongue, something that I won't recognize. And I have to admit it, when I first played the audio, I heard what sounded like it could have been a form of Latin to me. Because I was already setting my mind to hear that. AVS media demo. And I'm like, okay. Mm-hmm. And I start typing it in phonetically of what I hear and immediately pull up a website, AVS Media, and they have a demo audio. And when you use that demo audio, it was a recording software. And when you used it, every 20, 30 seconds, there's an audio watermark, which is this very British woman's voice say, AVS Media Demo. But when you're predisposed to believe that you're about to hear this foreign, long dead language, and Latin is the only foreign, language to me that would sound ancient and weird, AVS Media Demo starts to sound like there was some kind of weird language to it. And I questioned him about this, and, we played some more of his EVP, and then I came back and I said, no, I'm just curious. This AVS Media Demo audio, are you familiar with the company AVS Media? To which he responded, yes, we use their audio. And I said that we use their software. I said, okay, well, this is called a watermark. And I tried to walk him through what he was hearing, but he wouldn't have it any other way. This was the Holy Grail. Linguists from around the world had chimed in on it, and they couldn't crack this code, and that wasn't even the message. The real message was in playing it backwards. You could hear this voice say, is my baby, save it. So during the commercial break, I had Tim, my producer and co-host, just simply say the words AVS Media Demo and then play it backwards. And lo and behold, we got his voice saying, is my baby, save it. So it was identical. His response was, you're comparing apples to oranges. It's two different things. This is a female voice. Your buddy's got a male voice. These don't sound anything alike. And I said, they sound exactly alike. And I took what I heard that say, and then we started actually finding and pulling audio from different sources on YouTube and other places of people using AVS Media Demo software. And all of a sudden, his ghostly voice started appearing in other people's recordings around the world. And you couldn't get through to this guy. That becomes the danger in paranormal investigating, of being so focused on being right and having the definitive answer, that here was this legendary ghost hunter in his own mind who was quickly disassembled in 30 seconds of time on the air. That became probably one of our most explosive episodes. That episode, I literally think, made about 1 million downloads in a month. And
I enjoyed it.
Blew away every one of our other episodes. So it was an interesting aspect of it, and certainly if you'd like to use any part of that for your teaching, I give you permission to go ahead and do that and let people hear how mistakes can be made. And if you're in that mindset, how you can trip yourself up.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, there's valuable lessons that I could talk about, but to actually play that tape, it's valuable. I mean, anytime you come in kind of arrogant and you have all these credentials, Ryan Institute, Duke University, you're almost like beyond approach. You got to think about, is that where you want to be on this? I mean, that's a hard position to take, and it's one that's going to cost you dearly if you're wrong. And it did cost him dearly, because, once you lose credibility, you can't bring anything to the table anymore. Everybody's like, it's no good. Second thing is to be so married to that, to where even logic, right in the face of logic, he would embarrass himself on the radio. I don't want to take that position. The other thing is, how could he not know his equipment that badly, that he has a damn watermark in his editing software, and he's never ran into that before? He should have be getting AVS Media every time he did a EVP. And then the other thing was, his EVPs were level EVP. The other ones were scrubbed so poorly, I wouldn't even put them in my list. They were just too poor to even develop. But anyway.
Right, and it sounded segmented as though he had taken some of the audio out of context, like somebody else talking, and then he would clip it and present it as EVP. So yeah, there are a lot of mistakes, and we tried politely off air. I sent him an email sending him all the links saying, hey, I understand that I just kind of shook your world, and I apologize for that, but I know as a real investigator, you probably want the opportunity to re-examine this. And, if you want to talk about it. And he just kept on the attack even 24 hours later. And within a few weeks, he continued sending us hate mail and telling us, what charlatans we were, and just would not vibe to it. And I think the world would have respected him better had he just said something along the lines of, wow, you're right, I made a mistake. And then made that a learning moment as opposed to a defining moment for him in his illustrious paranormal career.
He should have, Dave. He should have begged you to come on the air for a 5 or 10 minute segment in the beginning of the show, and just said, "Hey, just apologize. Maybe try to maybe save some face, and say, I agree now. I'm taking another look at this thing. I mean, there's no experts. You can't come across as an expert. You're going to get nailed on it somewhere. Somewhere you're going to get nailed on it." All
right. Well, let's try to power through some more of these audio bits. Okay. And I don't know if we'll get through all of them, but let's at least hit a couple more of these. This one, you ask, what do you do for entertainment? See, I love that kind of question. It's outside the box. Where were you doing this recording?
I was actually in Oxford, PA. There's a Dunkin' Donut there to get my morning coffee, sit in the sun, and that's where I was. And I said, what do you do for entertainment? And it sounds like 3 different people. They go, hemp, hemp, hemp. And here's the weird thing, Dave. They kind of date themselves because we don't really call marijuana hemp anymore.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of like an old term. Or if you're talking about using the material to make rope or whatever, it's referred to more as hemp. But, they might be dating themselves a little bit in that response.
All right, let's go ahead and play that.
What do you do for entertainment? What do you do for entertainment?
Are you sure they're not saying hump? I'm just kidding. Let's go. Speaking of which, we go right into your next question for audio number 7. And I think this one's pretty clear. We probably don't even need an explanation. Go ahead and play that one for us, Keith.
Do you have sex? Do you have sex?
No.
She kind of screams like a cougar, huh?
Yeah, and it sounds very feminine in nature, right? So, God, no. Yeah. Finally, I'm getting the break over here. All right, number 8. Anybody with us this evening? Where do you get this audio?
I think this is Ebenezer Church Road again, and this is used as an example in my classes of what not to do. And unfortunately, the gentleman made a mistake. He says, "Is anybody with us this evening?" But you can clearly hear there's a car coming down the road. And it's such a shame because this guy sounds like he says a whole sentence. The car drowns it out except the very last word where he goes, service. And it's creepy sounding, and I would love to know what that sentence was, but we'll never know.
Is there anybody here with us this evening? Is there anybody here with us this evening?
Can you hear that okay, Dave?
Oh, yeah, you can hear service come through really loud and clear. Next one is, what, you think you're catching the disembodied neigh of a horse?
Yeah, this one I was at Deer Creek Cemetery, and I went around to the back of the church. I set my recorder on in a windowsill, and there was a guy with a metal detector back there digging a hole. And he was, because I've measured it since then, he was like 95 feet away from me. And he yells to me, he's like, "Hey, are you taking measurements on blah, blah, blah?" And I start to walk over him because I don't want to yell out, "Now I'm talking to dead people." Sound like an idiot, So I walk over to him, and I start talking. So now I'm doing EVPs. What's EVPs? What's electronic voice? On and on. The other investigator who was with me got curious that I was talking to this guy. He came over with a recorder in his hand. So now we have 2 recorders, 95 feet apart, and we catch this sound. And between the 2 recorders, I can tell it's much closer to my recorder, which puts it right in the back of the church. Really
All right, we're getting a little bit of that
full
chipping noise again. You said you were right in the back of the church, and then we lost you. So go from there.
Yeah. So this puts this sound by the recorder in the back of the church, which is impossible for the sound to be there because there's like a 4-foot rock wall all around this cemetery. But it was definitely closer to my recorder, which put it right behind the church. Now, before we play that again.
Hold on. Yes.
I'm sorry. Notice in the recording, we're talking over it. We actually don't hear it at all. You can hear the conversation between me and the metal detector guy, and we're not acknowledging it. We don't stop talking. We don't go, wow. We don't do anything. We just have our conversation like we can't hear it, which we didn't hear it. I've
got to laugh, and we're going to play this again, and I'm gonna supplant something in your mind again. But go ahead and play that one more time for us now. There is a segment in there when you can hear the voice, and being a fan of Mel Brooks in the movie Young Frankenstein, during the neighing, you hear that voice sounds like it says Frau Blucher to me, which I guess is horse glue in German or whatever. But every time they mention Frau Blucher's name in the movie Young Frankenstein, horses begin to neigh and whinny. Let's play that one more time and listen to that little cue now that I've planted it in your mind. Frau Blucher. All right, good times. Now let's go to the next one, the number 7. And where were you that you captured this?
I don't recall on this one, but it was just kind of a non sequitur. I don't know why 7 was important at that time. I don't know, but it's so clear and loud. I just put it in the recording.
All right, and our next one, number 11. Where do you want to set this up, or should we just play the audio?
I'll just give a little setup here. Sometimes, just to kind of tell if somebody's around or not, I'll ask them to tap my recorder. And sometimes, I think on this one, I asked for a tap on the recorder. It did it once, and I asked them to do it again, and it did it twice more, I think.
Tap, tap, tap. Can you do that again on one of the recorders? Tap, tap, tap. Can you do that again on one of the recorders?
Now, I understand, folks, there are some of you that are going to roll your eyes and say, well, he obviously was doing it. We have no way to verify this. We're just going to present the pieces that he's presenting to us with the assumption that he's giving us evidence that he wants to present as real. But so did Ed Azosky, Dave. But Ed Azosky made the fatal mistake of something that I could verify, something that I could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt was a mistake made. I have no way to do that with our guest. I'm simply taking it on the face value. And unfortunately, that's what we have to do in a lot of evidence when it comes to the paranormal. I'm always open to the idea of debunking. And if I could give you honest answers that would explain this to you, I'm sure you as a respectful investigator would love answers on those as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame everybody doesn't know me. And, I'm also a business owner. And, I mean, integrity is everything to me. I teach classes on the paranormal. And, I mean, how boring is it to be faking this? I mean, that would be horrible. And if I was faking it, they would probably be way better than they are.
All right. Let's go with our next audio. You're a veteran. And where was this taken?
I don't recall on this one either, but it's funny because some of these guys are cantankerous and old, and, this investigator goes, "Are you a veteran?" And the guy goes, "Get out of here." He's just like, leave me alone.
You a veteran? You a veteran?
Right, so you've got it telling you to get out of there. All right, and our next one, can you tell me your name?
Can you tell me your name? Can you tell me your name?
All right, the walrus was Paul, and so was this guy, apparently.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
All right, number 16. Now, we have a couple, How Did You Die, which we're not going to play. This is one you can find for yourself because the answer is not so friendly in response to you. The next one, again, will be on the website. Can you do whatever you want? And this sounds like a very disappointed spirit, but you can hear his his unhappy response on the website again. So just go check out midnightinthedesert.com and click on our guests banner so that you can check it out. And then now we're at audio clip number 16. What have we got here?
Yeah, 16 is interesting in that, once again, the response might give us a date as to when this person was around on Earth. I said, how did you die? And then there's a little bit of wind noise, and then you hear this kid go, fighting for the service. And it seems to me like anybody in modern times, if you ask them about any kind of service they're in, they're proud to be part of the Corps or the Army or the Air Force. And I'm wondering if this predates before we had different branches, like there was only maybe one service. I don't know.
Can you tell me how you died? Can you tell me how you died?
That really, I mean, that sounds like a young male to me.
It does.
It's really wild. Yeah.
All right. Now here's another question and not so happy response. Where were you and where did this one come from?
This was the haunted house in Habitat Grace where my guy got pushed over. You hear his foot hit the floor. There's something else that occurs there, and I think there's a dimensional pop in this, and then the ghost goes, punk.
Do you know how to ride a horse? Do you know how to ride a horse?
I hear the click.
He might say, get out, punk.
I hear the click, and then to me it sounded almost like somebody went, like they were spitting. Oh, I'm sorry, I just blew out Keith's headphones there. But it almost sounds like they spit. Like you're hearing the fall back and then the thump, and then you kind of hear this punk.
Well, what's funny, because now this has never happened to me. I'm hearing like "get out, punk," but of course, what I'm hearing on my phone is a bit different than when I play them for myself. But that's one, and I'm hearing that dimensional pop like twice in there, like it happens twice.
Let's go one more time on that one.
Okay.
Do you know how to ride a horse?
Wow. Yeah. I'm really hearing "get out, punk."
And here's something that you have to try as well, folks. A lot of times I'll watch people when they're investigating hold the recorder right up against their ear, and they can't hear the EVP, but I'm across the room and I can hear it. Sometimes you've got it so close to your ear, and even in using noise-canceling headphones, sometimes you will miss the sound because you're too close to it. I always try to hold it out a good arm's length away, and if I'm having trouble hearing it because people are chattering or causing noise, I'll try to bring it a little closer. But when you have it too close, the distortion it's just like listening to me talk like this and then listening to you talk like this.
Exactly.
It's going to become incoherent, and you might not even hear what's being said. So I always recommend people hold it out a little bit further when they do that. Now, number 18, we will put on the website again because not a very happy response to the same question, do you know how to ride a horse? You guys are big on wondering if horses were being
that
ridden.
can be a derogatory question in a way. You might be questioning somebody's manhood when you ask a guy that. Like, is he responsible enough for dad hand him the reins? Who knows?
Okay.
It might be like, do you have a driver's license?
Yeah, and he throws the Effenheimer at you. So that, again, we won't play on there, but we'll make it available on the website. All right, and as we're wrapping up our two final audio bits here, walk me through the last two. What's the story behind them?
Okay, so when me and another investigator or several investigators go to a place, the first thing we do is split up. And one thing that I've noticed is the people that are walking away from me in the graveyard, I call that doing a walkabout. They'll seem to get more attention from the ghost than me because I think they're more noticeable. Well, this investigator is walking away. He's not. All you can hear is his footsteps. All the breathing you hear, all that stuff is part of the EVP. This is a remarkable EVP in its length. But it's kind of sad because it sounds like a little girl, and she's going, "Help me, help, help," and she's breathing real hard. And then there's some car sounds. Then there's some dimensional popping in it, and then I hear somebody say Canterbury, which I looked up one time is like the Pope of England. But it goes on quite a bit.
Now, do you corroborate this? Will you look? I mean, is there video, or do you just accept some of these on the face value again? To me, I would need video to see what this person's doing, who's holding the recorder. Is there any chance they're walking? Because when I'm walking on uneven ground and it's cold or too hot, you'll hear me murmuring. Oh, son of a God.
Yeah, well, obviously that I'm like, what is wrong with this guy? I've told him better. He's got the thing so damn close to his mouth. He's breathing all in this. He knows better than this, right? I'm thinking it's him. But, after having conversations and stuff, and I actually watched him walk away. He was in my line of sight. I believe it's a real EVP, than a mistake that he made. He was like, no, I didn't do that. I didn't even have it close to my mouth. So it's kind of sad, but it's interesting. So the last one tonight, Dave, is kind of an interesting story. Ebenezer Church Road again. And me and this investigator have went there many times. This is one of my favorite places to go. And it was night, and it was cold, and it was spooky. The moon was out, and it was casting these weird grave shadows everywhere, and it was just one of these spooky nights, close to Christmas. So the one investigator, he stays by the church. I walk into the graveyard about 100 yards away from him so we can do a session. So we're getting into the session, and all of a sudden, this church either fixed or had installed a sound system where they did like Christmas music, and it scared us to death. I jumped out of my skin. I mean, it was super loud coming out of their steeple, and we just kind of looked towards each other like, well, we can't do this now. We can't do an EVP session. It's beaming this music roll out. So later when I got the tapes and I looked at them to edit or listen to them, it turns out that not only did it scare me and him, but it scared one of the ghosts. And the ghost goes, "What?"
So it's responding and they're kind of alarmed by that as well. Now, again, is it in that moment that the two realms are bleeding together and they're wherever they are, the bell is ringing at a time it shouldn't? Or they're hearing something that is bleeding through to their universe, to their dimension that makes no sense to them, is the disembodied voice or the what did you call it? AVP?
Yeah, it's a EAP, electronic
right.
audio phenomena. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, it seems like he's in my environment,
right?
And he's feeling the same thing I'm feeling. Like, this doesn't normally happen. When did they start doing this? But
Great stuff.
I don't
Dean,
know. Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending some time with us. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. We have got to go. When we come back, it's the Witching Hour next on Midnight in the Desert.